Edge at sea, where Pete and I will break down for you exactly what's going on with China, what's going on with the chance of a Fed rate cut, and what is going on with the NASDAQ. We'll have all that and more right here on the Rebel's Edge. Bang! Pete, in lieu of showing people out the window, there's where we are at, folks. The Atlantis in the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. We're on the Grant Cardone Foundation cruise. There's Nassau, of course. And it's already raised $5 million for his charity, where they help inner city kids and so forth. A lot of really generous people. Shoot, the guy that won the poker tournament the other night, Pete, he matched the pot and gave it all to charity.
How great is that? Honestly, I mean, I'll tell you what, John, it's been fun. It's been phenomenal. This a lot of kudos to the Ritz-Carlton too, by the way. I mean, this is about as top of the world as you could possibly get, the world of cruise ships. I don't know how it gets any better, and everybody's saying it doesn't get any better. So it spoiled me because this is my first cruise ever, and it's at the very top. It's all downhill from here.
Well, it is a fabulous experience, folks, and we will be doing more. So if you're somebody who wants to go on the high-end cruise and do a little talking about stocks and some trading tips, well, Pete and I are going to be doing that at 5 p.m. today with this cruise, but we'll be doing our own in the wintertime. So stay tuned, as they say. All right, let's talk, Pete, about Macro Minute. My Macro Minute is going to be focused on the Fed, that Fed tool that we look at over at the CME. It's showing about an 87% chance of a cut on December 18th, so quarter point, but I think people will appreciate it, and certainly people with adjustable rate mortgages always look forward to those cuts. What do you got today, Pete?
Well, as you look at that, John, I mean, it plays right into what I was looking at as well, which is the CPI. Obviously, the data is what everybody's looking for. That's what Powell and the Fed, that's what they're looking for. And that's coming up later on in this week as well. So it's something that, you know, it's just going to keep on stacking up, John. I mean, it wasn't that high early on, but then it immediately started to explode. It's been 70%. We're going to do cuts. 75%. Yeah, we're going to do cuts. And as you point out, now it's what, 87%, I think you said. So, I think those chances are pretty high, but then a lot of folks are actually looking out to 2025 saying, but will those cuts start to cut back? Will we get as many cuts as everybody's looking for? And we all know this year, they all blew it because everybody said we're going to get all these cuts. And it took quite a while before the Fed started to do it.
Yeah. And then when they finally did, the rates went up. Not the ones that they cut, but the ones that the bond vigilantes were out there betting on. And in fact, we're still up about 60 bips, Pete, from where we were when they made the cut, because we're still at 4.18%, I think, on the 10-year. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Fantastic futures. I'll say crude oil, Pete, because it's seeing about a 2% rally today. We're unlikely to sustain much in the way of, 75, 80. With the incoming President Trump saying, drill, baby, drill. But a 2% rally today takes us back towards $69 a barrel. And as they say on Landman, Pete, 60 to 75 is the sweet spot for the oil companies. Yeah. They don't really want to see it in the 80s because it kind of causes cutbacks in people's driving and so forth. And they don't want to see it below 60 because it impacts them negatively in terms of the price that domestic crude gets for coming out of the ground. All right, Pete, what do you have for fantastic futures?
I'm just going to throw this at you because a lot of people probably missed this on Friday, but we actually, John, got into the 15s on Friday for the volatility index. And it's something we've been talking about here for a while now. And yes, we've bounced back. Here we are at, call it 13 and a half, somewhere in there. But it has not only gotten tighter and tighter and tighter. And part of the reason it was at 1270 into the 12s for the VIX was, well, they're pricing in the weekend. So Fridays are always a little bit different of a day. But nonetheless, that volatility at the low to mid 13s and underneath 14, John, I think that's something that we are getting a little bit more and more accustomed to. And that's for all the right reasons when you consider of the record levels where we sit right now for the S&P.
Yeah, I'm going to say, Pete, that the fact that 50 Cent, as he's known, came in on Friday, that's the trader, folks, man or woman, we don't know. But whoever it is big, and they usually trade options that are right around that 50 cent level. And they came in and bought a ton of upside calls out in, I think, January, Pete.
Yep.
So we'll keep our eye on that. The timing isn't what you would suspect because this trade is usually a partial hedge and sometimes a bet on some swaying back and forth of volatility, and caught a little bit of it on Friday. We'll see if they catch more of it in the next couple weeks, maybe after that December 18th cut, Pete.
Yep.
All right. Well, for the Venture Minute, folks, we're going to talk about Atom Beam, ATOM Beam. And this is a fabulous company. We're going to show you a little vid here that Jared has done for it. But this is basically, if you're betting on AI, you need to bet on companies like Atom Beam that can take and packetize data so that they can get, 75% less energy use for a packet versus just streams of data coming back and forth. Atom Beam is really that company, folks. That's what they do. And so everybody wants to find a way, since you know that AI is very thirsty for energy, and that's one of the big draws at these data centers. Well, Atom Beam can basically take that data and cut it by 75% in terms of how much energy it has to rely on to get that data processed and back out. So Atom Beam is doing a raise. Strangely enough, the raise ends on December 18th. So if you would like to participate in that, we are already part of that. And yes, this is a paid announcement about Atom Beam. So remember, folks, if you would like to invest this particular round, the seed round is closing December 18th, same day as the next Fed meeting. So if you would like to invest in what we think is a fabulous company before they go public, well, you can do it at invest.atombeamtech.com. That's invest.atombeamtech.com. All right, Pete, let's dive into some stocks, shall we?
Let's do it.
Interpublic Group, they used to call this one. Now it's the Interpublic Group of Companies or some such name. Somebody probably got paid a lot of money to come up with that. But IPG is the company. They are being taken over by Omnicom, and it's only trading 4 times the normal volume, Pete. It's about 16 million shares versus 4 million on a complete session. So people are betting pretty big that this continues and that this deal gets done probably in the next 5 to 6 months.
And they're trying to put this thing together as fast as they can, John, because of the fact that they're trying to take on the Metas of the world and some of the others, Google, where they're having to deal with some of the AI sort of solutions to this whole industry. So it's big, and they talked about the synergies being about 750 million. So that's quite a nice number. And the spike in the volume, to your point, the volume is off the charts, absolutely massive volumes. And the spike that we got, it's not there right now, but it got close to that 33 level, or maybe even just above 33. But nonetheless, a big spike, maybe kind of cooling off just a little. But this is big, and potentially, depending on if there were some investment banking going on here as well, John, it's why we've liked the financials all year long, not just this month, not just the last 3 months or 6 months, the entire year, because investment banking is absolutely crushing it, whether it's Goldman or Morgan Stanley or Citi or Bank of America or JP Morgan, it doesn't matter. They are all just crushing it.
Yep, truly they are. And one that was crushing it early on, Pete, is Apollo Global Management. APO is the symbol here, folks. It closed Friday at about 177. It opened at 189. Call it a nice $12 pop. And yes, we did have unusual option activity in this one. I mean, they're going to be going into the S&P 500. That's fantastic. The stock popped all the way to 189. And we think it shows you why you need to be disciplined, because every once in a while, these will just keep going. And then people will say, why did I bother to take profits? I hurt myself by taking. No, you didn't. You never hurt yourself taking a profit, folks. And this is a great example because stock opened at 189. Now it's reversed and it's right back down to 177 where it was Friday. Does it go higher over time? Maybe, but why wouldn't you have cashed in on those big fat profits at least 50%? That's what Pete and I do. We take off 50% when the stock pops or drops, depending if we've got calls or puts. Pete, what do you think of this one?
It's pretty amazing, John. And the spike, to your point, it's a 52-week high. It's an all-time high. It hit 189. And of course, when it opens right there, I think the odds definitely are, first of all, they're in your favor because if you did get the options or if you were in the stock, it's a great opportunity to say, you know what, let me take off half, like you were just talking about, John. Let's take some, put it in our pocket and see what happens after that. So you don't want to be a pig. I will say this as well, though. This is a stock that even on this big spike that it's had, it's trading at about a 20 PE, which is fairly, I think, a good level right now in the market. So it's something I think we all have to keep a close eye on. But this is a name that when you look at it, 89 to 189, and here it is at 189. Now it's pulled back significantly off of that. That's a big, big run. So definitely always look back at the charts at least to see and say, hey, maybe I take off 50%. Maybe I take off a little bit more than that, John, just to get enough off that I feel better. And you still can hold some along the way for the upside.
Yeah, I would definitely think it goes higher because of its inclusion into the S&P, Pete. But why did those people buy those calls? Probably because of an inkling or maybe even a tip that the stock was going to be included in the S&P 500. It goes in along with Workday, replacing two other stocks that are out. So if you knew that, well, we didn't, but we saw the activity in the calls and it gave you the shot to participate. Yeah. All right. Now for this one, Pete, this is a rough one. There is nothing hotter other than in technology. In the biotech side, other than a cure for cancer, it's all about obesity. It's Mounjaro over at Lilly, or it's Ozempic at Novo Nordisk or whatever. Those have been in huge demand and people are seeing real results. Well, so everybody wants to get in on the game. BioAge wanted in on the game, and their product, unfortunately, Pete, that they put together had some issues with liver problems. So they halted the trials and said, no, we're not letting you do this in humans. You got to go back to the drawing board, guys. Stock is down 75%. Look at that drop from $20 a share down to under $5 today.
That's pretty ugly, John. And when I was looking at the pipeline they've got, the pipeline's not very deep, number one. Number two, it's not very far out there. They don't have any drugs right now in the pipeline that are above a phase 2. And for the folks who don't know, you've got your preliminary, you've got your 1, you've got your 2, you've got your 3, and then you've got to get the fact where they actually take a look at it and give you the approval or not. So it's still a long ways out. They've got a decent balance sheet. I look at that and I'm fairly impressed, but I'm not all that impressed with the fact that it's not a very deep pipeline. So that's number one. Number two, they've got a lot of work in front of them, John. When you put out something like this and you've got to pull it because of the safety issues, that's going to freak people out for a while. So this is one that I'd probably stay away from for a while.
Yeah, I am not in it, Pete. And if I was, I'd be a little scared, just like you said. Yeah. All right, let's talk about some Chinese stocks. One of the biggest out there, Baba. These guys are going to get the benefit, Pete, of China going to its loosest monetary policy, according to what they've said anyway, since 2011. That is causing PDD or Tencent, any of the big Chinese stocks are reacting to a loose monetary policy, which means, of course, they can borrow. The banks are going to be pushing money across the table to them. They're more or less an arm of the CCP anyway. So this one's seeing a lot of love today, Pete. It's not had a great run this year, as you see from that chart. Look at it in October up at 110. And going into today, it was down in the 80s. But it sees a nice pop after that. And we'll keep an eye on all of the Chinese plays. but I imagine this is going to carry them further, Pete. Might not be all pops like this, but it's going to be something that lifts them over time.
Absolutely. And looking at this one, John, as you mentioned, it's not just a Baba play. This is a Chinese play. Absolutely. So you look at PDD, you look at JD. Now, not 100% is that the case, but when you're looking at some of the bigger names that people have much more familiarity with, when you're looking at Alibaba and some of the names that at least they understand what they do and how they do it, I think it's important to know what's going on there, and the fact that we have seen some unusual in some of the Chinese names and those related to China as well, John, looking for a pop at some point in time. We haven't seen it, but this could be the start of something. So we'll see if this has got any longevity to it. It certainly should, but this is a big jump today for Baba. I mean, Baba doesn't oftentimes get 8%, 10% type jumps to the upside, but it's getting a really nice lift. And to your point, in the last couple of months, hasn't looked very good. So at least it's lifting up for the first time in a while.
Yep. Well, we're going to dive into some sports now, Pete. And even though Pete knows this better than even these guys that are discussing it, we thought that the conversation these guys were having about the 12-team playoff and who gets not included, like Alabama, for instance, and why Bama didn't get in. Let's take a look and listen.
Brands matter. Yes. This isn't about a meritocracy. It's a branditocracy. The one consistency that the committee had played to date was the loss column. It ordered them rank and file right in a row. And if the teams were close, the team that won got. There was maybe an exception or two. To move Alabama there, it locks them in. It's good to be the king. They've gotten the benefit of the doubt, and they've earned it. But it's not based on what's taken place on the field. You look at a Georgia team that dropped 9 spots after losing on the road, when Ohio State only drops 4, losing at home to a 6-5 team. Miami drops all the way down, losing to a pretty good Syracuse team, when other teams enjoy different scenarios. Yep. So it's not equal. It's never designed to be equal. And these teams don't earn their positions. They're placed. The whole deal here is to get the most eyeballs and to make the most amount of money possible. Yep. It's to make money. This whole thing is set up to do that.
Everybody's got an opinion, man. Right?
Well, and it's all about ratings, right, Pete?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, you know, some people would look at it, a purist like Pete might say, well, it's supposed to be the 12 best teams. Mm-hmm. And yes, but ratings have something to do with it too. Yeah. And I think, just as that group was discussing, some of these teams, people aren't as enthralled with seeing. I mean, it was funny. I saw one guy, Pete. It was in fact Cam, the quarterback. Cam was going crazy. Cam Newton was saying, you know, ain't nobody heard of Boise. Nobody care about Boise. Yeah, Ginty, they care about him. Nobody care about Boise.
I'll tell you what, he couldn't be more wrong, John, and I appreciate him. I like him. You and I have gotten to know him. We met him back in the day when he was still a quarterback at Carolina. But I got to tell you something. I think they got it right. I did my own version before the sports show that I do on Sundays, and every single name is right where I was thinking it would be. Because how do you look past an Indiana who goes 11-1? I understand that they got beat up pretty good against Ohio State, but they also had a dropped punt by the punter where he dropped it. They gave him the ball deep in the territory. They had a punt return for a touchdown. So a lot of it really was the special team side of it and everything else. But they had 11 other teams, John, that they went up against. Now, people could say, well, you know, those teams weren't all that good. Hey, it was the Big Ten. Big Ten is still considered one of the very best, as a matter of fact. So even if you're playing the lower end of the Big Ten, I don't think that makes this any worse. And by the way, Indiana, just to give you a little idea, they had 520 points they scored this year, only gave up 176. Nobody, and I mean nobody, has those kinds of numbers. So they performed against who they went up against to the highest level. So absolutely incredible. They deserved it. Bama, Ole Miss, I love them both, but they don't deserve to be in there, because you can't get in there with 3 losses unless you win the championship game. That's where Clemson comes in. And John, you and I talked about Dabo Swinney and the fact that he's staying away from the portal. He's only done like 3 or 4 transactions total in the portal. This is a guy who still believes in, you know what, you recruit a guy, you form him into the player that he's going to be and the person he's going to be, because Dabo's very concerned about that as well. I have all the respect in the world. And you know what? Yeah, they're 10-3. They deserve to be where they are because they beat an SMU team that everybody loved. And SMU had to get in there as well, because even though they got beat, they deserved it from the season they had, and they didn't have 3 losses. So I think that this final 12 is perfectly lined up. Now, the only part that gets a little bit scary, John, is who has to play who after the first round. And that's where things get a little bit dicey, because I think Oregon's got the toughest sledding once you get past the very first week.
Yeah, because they get that bye.
Yeah.
And like you say then, Pete, it'd be better to not be the number 1 seed given who they're going to have to play in that first round for them, second round for these guys. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
All right. How about the Vikings, Pete? What do you think here?
Well, here's the one I wanted to bring up, because I do that radio show, as you know, and you're very nice. You always talk about it on the show here, but we do it 2 hours every single Sunday. I am a former Viking, but I also played for other teams. I can tell you this: the Vikings might be, by a lot of people, the worst 11-win team that there is. And a lot of people don't really like what the Vikings have been able to do. But again, John, when I look at these guys, I'm like, well, but they are winning. I think the problem people have with the Vikings, why they're not very excited, is they're not winning by much, and they're not winning big enough against a lot of inferior teams that are under 500 or at 500 in terms of wins and losses when the Vikings play them. So do they have a very simple schedule? I would say they probably have the easiest schedule in the entire NFL. And as a matter of fact, John, they still get your Bears coming again as well. So the chances that they can continue this winning streak that they're on right now are there. Sam Darnold, I got to give him all the credit in the world, because I was as difficult on him. I was definitely on and critical about everything that he had done previously. But John, what if I told you in the last 4 games, he's thrown 12 touchdowns and 0 interceptions? I mean, this is against inferior competition, but it is the NFL. He's doing what they need to do to get the Minnesota Vikings into a great spot. And they are right below Detroit right now when you look at the division, with Green Bay right on their heels. So they might be playing in the best division in all of football, quite frankly. I think the Vikings are probably an overrated team to some degree, but don't look past them, because they have the tools to beat people.
Yeah, and anytime you got Jefferson out there on the field, Pete, you got a chance to put up, 2 touchdowns just with that guy.
Yeah.
Let alone that Darnold has a bunch of other targets now that have worked out pretty well for him.
Not bad.
Well, thanks for joining us, folks. Pete and I, again, we're on the Ritz-Carlton cruise for the Grant Cardone Foundation. Again, over $5 million raised already for the foundation that supports kids and education of kids, some activities for the kids and so forth. It's been a fabulous time. We've got another 2 days on the boat, and we will be coming to you again tomorrow from the boat. Remember, RebelCon 2025. That's with our friend Grant Cardone as well. The 20th and 21st, that's going to be Grant with 7,000 people in Vegas at the MGM. Pete and I will be there with him on stage. And then RebelCon, the 22nd of March. So a lot of you have been clicking on this link. Please continue to do so. You can follow that at marketrebellion.com/RebelCon, or just grab that QR code and you could be joining us. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks.